Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are your multi-award winning Tottenham Hotspur podcast, and we do return. I'm going to let you in to a little secret. We've got three wonderful, fabulous returning guests, the Last Word on Spurs, of course. This wasn't a show that I really wanted to be doing or even scheduled to have planned. I think on the back of our show that we did, I want to now say on Tuesday, feeling was, I'm going to be honest with you, that we were going to try and leave things until we had a decision on Ange Postecoglou. But look, Tottenham being Tottenham, and here we are 15 days on from winning the Europa League. As everybody kind of knows in the title of the show, we're currently in limbo. And just quite frankly, what the fuck is happening? What is happening at Tottenham Hotspur Football Club? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe these wonderful esteemed guests can maybe shed some light on what they think is happening at Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. But I think it's a really important show because there's a lot that has been reported, speculated, conjectured over the last 3-4 days where we'll try and give you our thoughts, our opinions, of course, and it's up to you wonderful people out there, the viewers and listeners, to kind of make their mind up on where you all are. But I think what's really important to say at the top of this show, because I've seen this kind of play out at the moment on social media around the fact that Tottenham don't need to say anything. And look, on that basis, some are absolutely right. Tottenham don't need to say anything personally. And Postecoglou is still contracted to the club. He's got, as we know, another year to run. And maybe in addition to that, a further year option on the contract. So Tottenham don't have to say anything. But I think what we're all acutely aware, those that follow Spurs very, very closely, know the way the season has played out and the way it has gone towards the end point of the season, that we were expecting some form of an update, some form of understanding as to if Ange Postecoglou is going to get that third season. And I think it's fair to say there's a huge amount of Tottenham fans out there, not all, a huge amount that feel, following Ange Postecoglou delivering Tottenham's first trophy in over 17 years, bringing home their first European trophy in over 40, he deserves that chance to lead Tottenham into that third season. There are also fans out there that will completely and utterly disagree with that. And then we come on to what's happening at the moment with regards to the board. We know Donna Cullen has left earlier in the week. There's been a lot of talk around potentially a massive reshuffling. And is that the reason why we're not getting some news? Let's ask the wonderful panel. Let's bring them in. First up, I've got the brilliant Jim from Oh So Spurs with us. Jim, how are you? It's a late shift.
I'm doing well, thanks, Ricky. Yeah, like everyone, I think we just want the answer that puts the speculation to bed, so we can all just enjoy Spurs with some kind of rough amount of certainty for the next few months and enjoy the transfer window. It's meant to be exciting, meant to be looking at players and getting excited for a build upon what happened last year. But yeah, hopefully the speculation comes to an end soon.
Yep. Ash, love to be back on the show. How are you?
Yes, I'm good, man. Well, being a Spurs fan was used to up the ups and downs. There's never a dull moment. And what can I say, man? We are waiting for the announcement to know what's going on with the manager. And since we last had a show, Donna Cullen's gone. She's left the board. And there seems to be some moving around at the top. So maybe that's the reason for the delay. Maybe it's going to be an announcement. There's been talks of takeovers. I'm sure we're going to talk and dive into that. But yeah, the one that everyone wants to know is about the manager, because if the manager is not fixed, then how can we get excited about transfers? And I think after the cup win, it's kind of messing up the mood. You know, Levy was talking about we need to use this as a springboard.
Yep.
Now it's kind of just bad publicity coming his way, in my opinion. So he needs to get this right. He needs to sort it out real early, and we need to know where our club is headed.
Oh man, I totally agree with that. Dave, we only bring you back for quiet ones, don't we? And I know this last 14, 15 days, we've had, look, I know last time you was on, Dave, you wanted to celebrate the Europa League, and rightly so, because we've waited 40 years for that. You know, some have not been alive to see Spurs win their last European trophy. And my worry is, or it's not my worry, I think it's the fact that a lot of people are slowly starting to become very drained over this situation around what comes next. And the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of fans out there that want to get excited for the summer. They want to get excited for next season, playing in the Champions League. But right now, we don't know who the manager's going to be, and we don't know our summer planning. So I'm sure you can, as well, Dave, understand it's quite frustrating right now, right? Not knowing what Spurs are doing next or when that comes.
Yeah, look, first of all, I thought it was very important to go off and take a week away and enjoy the Europa League success, because I know the club I support is an absolute basket case. It's constantly in a mess. And you think winning the Europa League would have brought unity, certainty around targets that you want to bring in and, togetherness and push this club forward. But it's had the opposite effect. We're getting chaos absolutely everywhere. And while we're sitting here with chaos up at board level and not knowing who our manager is going to be moving forward, everyone else is picking up targets in this mini transfer window that's open now, gearing up for next season. And it just feels like, yet again, Tottenham, piss poor plan and being left behind.
Agree. I do agree. Like I say, it's a tricky show to do, because I have to just say this. At any point on air, things can change. That is the nature of supporting a club like Tottenham and covering a club like Tottenham. So we are acutely aware things can change. And like I say, if anything does happen during this show, we'll have to quickly deviate away, like we've always done in the last 7-8 years of Last Word on Spurs, and focus on what becomes important. But we'll just kind of, if we can, explain or try to put into context where we understand things are at the moment. Firstly, with regards to Ange Postecoglou, which I think, rightly so, being our manager, that you'd feel would be the most important topic to discuss, and what is happening with regards to Ange. Now, it's understood Ange is, as we've said, currently in limbo. He's not knowing whether bringing home the club's first European trophy in over 41 years, ending that 17-year trophy drought, is enough to save him from the sack from Daniel Levy. We are hearing a lot of reports out there that it's still more likely Daniel Levy is going to sack Ange Postecoglou rather than retain the Australian. We've also heard a lot of reports throughout the last 24, 48 hours that staff inside the club have absolutely no idea what the future holds, and they know change is coming across a variety of departments, but nobody knows actually to what degree that is coming. It is understood that Postecoglou has now returned to England from holiday and will soon be provided with clarity over his future. Like I mentioned in the intro to this show, Ange still has 2 years remaining on his Tottenham contract, and it is understood the terms of his exit before that date were agreed prior to his appointment 2 years ago. If Daniel Levy, and of course it's a big if Daniel Levy is to pull the trigger on Ange Postecoglou, he will face a compensation bill in the region of 4 million. That would be on top of the 2 million bonus Ange has earned for ending Tottenham's trophy drought and guiding the club into next season's Champions League. It's also worth noting that for any potential replacement that Tottenham are looking at the moment in the market, that could cost them approximately around 10 million to bring in a potential replacement. And we know the candidates on that list at the moment, from what we have been hearing, is Thomas Frank being one of the names, Marco Silva being yet another prominent name that is on that list. And we know there's been links, as we've heard recently, to the likes of Oliver Glasner and Andoni Iraola. But it does feel at the moment, from what we're hearing out there, Frank has been the main runner for the job. If Tottenham are to make a change, they've held direct talks with him. We've heard nothing, of course, from the Brentford end. So that is currently where we are with regards to Ange Postecoglou. And that's where I actually do want to start. I mean, Jim, let's start with you on Ange itself. 15 days on, delivering the club's first European trophy in over 40 years. Is there an element of disrespect that Tottenham are talking to other managers? Is that what you'd expect them to do? Where are you with regards to, firstly, this topic around Ange and him not knowing at the moment?
Yeah, there's multiple facets to this. So I don't think anyone can really argue concretely each side that there's a clear answer to what Spurs should do, because you've got just such extremes on both sides with the league form and the cup win that there's completely valid arguments to have on both sides. And I think what side of that you're on is typically just going to come down to personal preference and sentiment around Spurs of what you think is best for the club. And my stance has been, I think we should stick with Ange Postecoglou, and there's more upside to giving this whole project another 3 months just to see what happens, because I don't think if it doesn't work out with Ange and 3 or 4 months into the season, it's clear the league form's not going to turn around. I don't think Thomas Frank's going to walk away from the opportunity to manage Spurs at that point, unless another club has taken him, if he's our top target. So it's largely about like, okay, what's the risk to not pulling the trigger now if you think that there's a risk to keeping him? And that the biggest risk for Spurs, they'll be saying is, well, our target won't want to join us anymore, I guess, if we miss the boat now. Now, the names I'm seeing linked with us, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think most of those names linked to people that would say it's the step up. I won't get or always get an opportunity to manage Spurs in one bad season and I'm back down in the pecking order and I wouldn't be considered for a club like that again. So I don't think Spurs need to panic into a decision, which to me just makes me think, like, why would you kind of take that risk of putting this on a new manager's shoulders? Because if, let's just say we wheel in Frank, and look, I think if he was given the job, it's not his fault that Ange Postecoglou lost his job. He's just accepted a job and an opportunity that's good for him. We give him our full backing as fans. He's no mug. These guys in this division, whether we think one's better than the other, they're all brilliant coaches. And if you gave any of these people brilliant squads, they would do good things with them. You know, long-term, consistently good recruitment underpins success for most good coaches. And most of those in the Premier League are very good coaches. So I wouldn't put any negativity onto Frank getting that opportunity if it was him and going for it. I have a little more of a preference probably for Glasner over him. But either of them, look, they're great coaches. They're good people, but I'd prefer Ange. But it is, the longer it goes on, I think the harder it gets for Spurs to go back to Ange. And I think it's a big shame because it feels, the whole feeling and vibe, the closest feeling I can put to it is a bit like when we lose a game after an international break. And there's that 2 weeks of a void where you're kind of just stewing in the unknown and frustration. And you just need that certainty of another game to come to kind of, you know, let you move on. And I feel like we're in that weird place of purgatory at the moment where we just don't know what's next. And that's worse than, it's worse than the other side in a way of having a change and not being on board with that change. But at least you know, you're kind of, you know where you stand. I'd rather that than just not knowing at all. But ultimately, I think this is all these delays and frustrations. Yes, they are annoying, but we do have to try and bite our tongues a bit and just take a breath, because the new CEO, this is a huge call for Vinay Venkatesham, right? This is a huge decision that he has to be a part of. And he's what a decision to have to make when you've barely been in the door 5 minutes. I think he was added to Company's House on Monday. So he's come in. He's probably obviously been chatting in the background about this. He will have been with Spurs, but he'll have now sat down in that room and been presented all the kind of information that's been going on, all the reviews that have been going on. And they'll be saying, right, what do you think? You know, this is your call. You're the CEO of the football side of the club. What do you want to do? Cool. Well, he's got to peeve off one half of the fan base and please the other by whichever way he goes. And I don't think Levy can. I think in the past, Daniel Levy has always had the authority and been able to step in when he feels someone else is making a decision he doesn't agree with. I don't think he can do that in this case. You can't undermine the first major decision from your new CEO. He can't. That's just not a relationship that's going to sustain. You've broken it on day one. So it's going to be huge. And I think I'm going to put this decision on Vinay, and I'm not. If it all depends, like if we bring in Frank and he wins his 5 of his first 6 games, everyone's going to go, perfect decision. You bring him in, or any other manager, and they lose 3 of the first 5 games, it's going to get toxic very fast. And everyone's going to say, why did we throw away the opportunity we have with Ange Postecoglou?
A lot of fair points there, Jim. A lot of fair points there. I mean, Ash, where are you on the fact, as I touched upon there with Jim, you know, Ange has delivered that European trophy. Yes, can't get away from it. He's also delivered for Tottenham across last season, their worst ever Premier League finish, worst ever amount of loss they've ever had in a domestic campaign. Where do you sit right now in regards to us 15 days on, at the time of recording, not knowing anything new than what we have done over whether he will remain the club's manager?
Bit like the fan base split. But if I'm being totally honest, the 17 losses for me, moving forward, I have a lot of concerns, you know, going into that Premier League. And I don't know what like he did tweak it. Let's have it right. He did change it for the cups, and my worry is that level of strategic approach sustainable in the league, and does he want to play his style of football, which is, you know, high risk, high rewards, or does he want to adapt and change and play more of a defensive role? So that's where I'm like, I'm not sure if going into the season I'm confident. However, I look at that cup run and I do appreciate what he's done, and I think it's amazing because it was the best day of a lot of Spurs fans' lives. That parade really showed us how big the club was. Like I think it was one of the Arsenal fans, I think it was Lee Judges, that came out and he said Chelsea could never. Do you know what I mean? So that amount of support, and even the other day, well done to the actual media team that showed all the fans across the world. I liked it. I shared it in a lot of groups when they showed, like, you know, Dallas Spurs. They were showing, like, you know, Korea Spurs. Like, it was just worldwide, nationwide. And I just felt so proud. And as you can see, I'm wearing my Spurs hoodie. I've got a Spurs top underneath. I just come back from playing football, full Spurs kit. People are like, oh, look at you. I don't know if I've seen you wearing a full Spurs kit before, you know. So I'm going over the top with it. And so I should be. And so we should be. We should be celebrating the fact that we are a European champion, and we won a major trophy. And I've seen a lot of the what's it called, the media stuff pushed out by Ange Postecoglou and his team, especially in the Australian press, ABC, I think it was, the documentary. And like, he's an incredible person, incredible man. And like, you have to give it up to him. He's done something incredible, you know. He's done something that Mourinho, Conte, say what you want to say about them, they're win now managers, they weren't able to do it. And he's gone and delivered something wherever he's gone, and he's delivered that trophy. But it's the league form, and it's now Champions League. Can he rotate that alongside with the injuries? That's where my question marks are, and that's where my concerns are. So I think that's where my head's completely split on that decision. Thomas Frank, coming into that, I hear the arguments for both as well, because I think the season before last, he finished 17th. I think he had like 39 points. So what now? This season, he's finished 10th. So we've got recency bias. The season before last, Postecoglou got 5th. So we can see the arguments on both sides. Which way do we land as Spurs fans? I personally wanted Xavi. That's the last time I was on the show. I was like, if we're going to play possession style football and we're going to carry on the philosophy, wouldn't it make sense to bring in a coach that can coach these players the actual style that, you know, we want to go into, the direction that we want to head into? And I agree with what Jim was saying about Vinay. If he's the CEO, the buck starts with him, if he's got the major decision. But I also look at Langer, and if he is the director of football, then ultimately he chooses the manager. So I'm looking at Langer, he's Scandinavian. I'm looking at Thomas Frank, he's Scandinavian. I can see that he likes data, the data approach. I know when I was watching interviews with Thomas Frank, he's heavy on data in terms of developing young players. I looked at Lewis Potter. He was actually a good player from the championship. He got Young Player of the Year in the championship. So it's not even like he was a nobody. He was bringing up players that had substance to them. So we're looking at other players like Alex Scott. A lot of Spurs fans wanted Alex Scott, and he was championship player of the year, and he had him under his book. So he's had to work with a lot of young talent, and we can't say, you know, he's had nothing and he's worked up a storm of them. He's had some good players to work with, is my point. But I think overall, he's a coach, and I think that's the direction I think Langer is moving in. From what I'm seeing, I'm just putting one-on-one and just trying to make logical sense of it all. And I think maybe that's the reason why. And I think the reason why they've come to the decision maybe before the cup final, before the cup win actually happened, and maybe they were surprised that A, he got it over the line, and B, the actual
Reaction.
amount of
The reaction.
people, the
Yeah.
reaction that the fans, get, and it kind of took them back a little bit. But I reckon they were looking at the losses from like January, February, having meetings every time. March, things weren't getting better. April, do you know what I mean? And I think these conversations, even before Vinay started, he was probably in the stands watching. We know about Paratici possibly coming back as well. So I'm sure he would have his own preconceptions of what style of football and what things he expects from the club. And so they would have had conversations probably with a lot of the players. I know a lot of the players have come out and they've, backed him publicly, and they've said it on social media that they're behind him. But I just don't know what the conversations were in the staff room. I know there was a report, and I know it's just an opinion piece, but there was a piece saying that early in the season that the players got together and they said, look, if we're going to take the cup competition seriously, we need to band together and we need to play a bit more pragmatic or adapt to the actual game. We can't play, this is who we are, this is our style. And so if that did happen, I'm not saying it did, it's just an opinion piece. I'm trying to be objective here. If they was to lean into that and that did happen, then you have to say maybe that's the reason why Ford has taken that direction.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, so many valid points there with regards to that particular topic of it. I mean, Dave, coming over to you, I just wonder, even with the whole thing around other managers, I think when you see so many of the online polls out there that we have done, and look, again, it's important that I say for this, I can't speak for everybody, right? The reality is I can only speak for what I've seen with regards to online, on different forums, even on different podcasts that I hear as well. It does feel that the groundswell of report or support, should I say, is there at the moment for Ange Postecoglou, Dave. That's what it feels like at the moment. And I just wonder, if you're looking at what the remit would be of a manager, and for him personally, in his first season, he obviously finished 5th. We obviously had that great honeymoon period of the 10 games, the 8 wins, the 2 draws. And yes, I think we have to be real and say, even that first season, we had a decimation of injuries. There was a real lack of consistency, but we finished 5th. In another season, finishing 5th, as we saw this season, would get you into the Champions League, right? Obviously, for Tottenham, that didn't happen. The second season, he's going to win a trophy. You just wonder for anybody else coming in what that remit will be, given he's finished 5th in his first season, without Harry Kane, I must add, in the midst of a rebuild. In the second season, he's won a trophy. And potentially we're in a situation where now we could rip all that up and start again with yet another rebuild, where his final words as being Spurs head coach was that, final words in the last presser was, we need experience. I want to keep Romero, almost insinuating that we need to buy in experienced players for this next chapter of Tottenham under him. What is going on, Dave, in your mind in regards to this situation we find ourselves in this limbo that I've described it?
I mean, look, for me, I think there's a power struggle up in the boardroom, and that's why we haven't really got any decision or clarity over Ange Postecoglou's future. Look, people say the club don't have to put out an official statement, and they're right. They don't have to. And once you start doing that, you start validating every media story. And where does it stop? You're going to have to do it over every bit of news that comes out. However, they could have used the opportunity in the program for the Brighton game to put a little line in there to maybe give the hint that Postecoglou's future is safe. Now, by Postecoglou's terms, he said he wants to continue. And you know what? Fair play to the guy. I actually think he deserves a lot of respect for wanting to continue with the amount of media pressure that's been on him, the fan sentiments towards him and stuff like that. He could have easily said, you know what? I've delivered. I'm out. I don't need this. He hasn't. He still wants to continue, which shows he's still got the hunger and the appetite for the job. But the problems is the style of football, and he hasn't shown over 2 seasons that he can compete across multiple different fronts. And that's where the question mark comes in, despite him, delivering a trophy at Tottenham Hotspur. And I think the longer that this decision goes on, it's clear that the board are out there sounding out different targets or speaking to other people, engaging the interest in the job. But what I won't do, and I know there's been a lot of, I'm not going to say hate towards Postecoglou because that's probably the wrong word, but a lot of pressure put on Postecoglou by the Tottenham fan base. But what I'm not going to do is just sit here and anybody but Postecoglou. I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. And that's what I've seen, with the large clamour towards Thomas Frank, the sentiments towards him, all the standards that people have placed on Ange Postecoglou and why he should be sacked. They're almost letting him slide for someone like Thomas Frank. Most people sit there and go 34 defeats over 2 seasons unacceptable, rightly so. This guy has 33 defeats over 2 seasons. You know what I mean? So is one defeat any more acceptable? And I think we're starting to get into the realms of anybody but Ange, Silva, Iriola. I'm sorry, but they're not the names to take this football club forward. Our big going into next season, off the back of delivering a Europa League, the next manager coming in here is going to be expected to challenge across multiple fronts. That's the expectation now. After delivering a Europa League, it doesn't matter what type of manager you bring in. And at the end of the day, Iriola, Marco Silva, Thomas Frank, none of them have demonstrated that they can sustain 2 competitions. We could sit here and say, well, some of them haven't had a chance to manage in Europe. Okay, what about League Cup and FA Cup alongside the league? They haven't shown that they can sustain that multiple competitions across seasons. And that doesn't, for me, when I look at them options, they're not enough for me to sack Ange Postecoglou. If we really want to kick on and we really want to move forward, I'm okay with changing Ange if there's a name of gravitas presented to me that I can look at and say he's got good, solid history in the game of competing on multiple fronts with teams. And at the end of the day, the reality is as well, this squad needs massive improvements like Postecoglou has been calling for. See, where I was coming into this season, Ricky, if anyone was listening to me back in the summer, I said this squad wasn't good enough to compete on multiple fronts. It never was going to be. And a lot of the sentiment around this season has been that this squad is better than what Postecoglou makes it. Well, I'm sorry, but this squad has been tested more than ever before, than any squad in my whole lifetime. And the answers back don't support that narrative. It's not as good as people make it out to be. Look at the amount of games we lost. We can pin it all on Postecoglou. But I've been a Tottenham fan for a long time, and there's been multiple reports and of players moaning that they're not getting game time. They've been given game time this year. What have they served up on the football pitch? It's not all just on the manager. I also think Postecoglou is guilty of fans moving the goalpost to a certain degree as well. Last season, when he went out of the Carabao Cup to Fulham, most people were sitting there going, he should be prioritising cup competitions. That's what we want delivered at Tottenham. Then all of a sudden, he prioritises cup competition this season, and everyone's reverting back to, now all of a sudden we really care about the league and stuff like that. So there has been a shift in the goalpost to Postecoglou. And I'm not sitting here saying he's the answer, but I would much rather go into next season and back this guy than I would Thomas Frank, Iriola, or Marco Silva, to be quite frank. Give me a name of gravitas. Give me a name that I look and say he will attract top quality players. He can navigate this squad. I'm okay with it. But I seriously think we're starting to get into the realms where it's anybody but Ange Postecoglou. And I'm not digging out Ash here. I think Ash has great points. We've got 2 routes to go on. One, you bring in a guy that's known for working with you and dragging them forward over a quick space of time. Or you realise that going into the Champions League, trying to compete in the Premier League and lift a Carabao Cup or an FA Cup, you need a certain level of squad. And I'm sorry, but that's where we need to bring in serious players in this door that are of the level required so that we can go and compete. Because I'm not sitting here for another project, another rebuild and stuff like that. Now is not the time. We're just after delivering a Europa League trophy. If we were in the abyss, and stuff like that. If we didn't lift the Europa League trophy, then you'd sit there and say, okay, maybe I have time for another rebuild. But right now, off the back of Europa League, heading into Champions League, now is not the time to keep going down the route, signing young players and bringing in a guy to make it work. Because the reality is it'll go tits up next year because he doesn't have the quality on the pitch to deliver the results that the fans want. So for me, present proper names forward and then I'll reconsider.
Dave, I think again, a lot of fair points, Dave. I think a lot of fair points. Gut feeling, just one word. We've got to go for a break from each of you. Dave, to stick with you. Will Ange be the Spurs head coach still going to season 3?
The longer it goes on and just my gut feeling off based, I thought, they could have put out a line or two now to sort of suggest that this will be a marriage of convenience next season. My gut feeling is I think it's coming to an end. Just one more thing, though, just quickly, Ricky, is one thing I didn't mention in my point was the players. It's reported that Christian Romero has, a very close relationship with Postecoglou. It's reported that Bentancur doesn't want to sign on the dotted line on a new contract until he knows who the manager is. And a lot of this squad really like this manager. You know, despite the narratives that were painted this season, that they're not having him, they're throwing him under the bus, this, that, and the other. With the words that they've come out with towards the back end of the campaign, they all really like this guy. And if it's been a deciding factor in years gone by to sack the likes of Nuno, Jose Mourinho, etc., that the squad weren't having them, then surely that plays a serious impact in their decision in keeping Ange Postecoglou. Because I think also where they've got a massive decision, we've also got, we already know what we have to do this summer if we're keeping Ange. But if we don't, how do we know Romero doesn't walk, Bentancur doesn't walk, one or two other players don't walk? All of a sudden, you're looking at 9-10 positions then, and it mounts up, and you're not going to get all of that done. And that's where you go into trouble next season, and you can't afford to be in trouble going into a season with Premier League and Champions League, because you're going to be embarrassed and ripped apart.
I have to agree, though. I don't think you can underestimate, remember to you, Jim, as Dave touches upon there, that feeling in the dressing room. We've had words from Pedro Porro also in the last 24, 48 hours that he's very protective of Ange, very, very protective, in the way in which he spoke about him in that interview he's done recently with The Guardian with Sid Lowe does suggest that he still has very much, to some degree, the backing of the dressing room. Do you feel the same, Jim, that the longer this goes on, as David said there, do you think it's more unlikely than likely Ange retains his job?
Yeah, I agree with what Dave was saying there completely. I think to us, it's a big deal what the players want as well. And it's fair to say the majority, it's not even that it's the majority of the players, it's that it's the core leadership group of that squad. And I agree with the comments around the squad not being as good as perhaps we make it out to be. But I think there's several players in there that you continue to build the squad around. And those being, James Maddison, Van der Ven, Romero, Vicario, Porro, Udogi, they're all very much behind the manager and publicly behind the manager. So you are causing some unrest amongst very important assets at your football club. But I don't think the club will lose much sleep over that. Their view will probably be that if the new person, if Ange is to leave, and like I've said, I think we should be keeping him, but if it's changed, they'll probably view it as, well, if we get off to a quick start, it's amazing how quickly you'll just move on and people will just forget and it won't be a thing. And it's very easy to say, like, as well, Romero's going to stay if Ange stays and he's going to leave if he doesn't. I think the club will say, excuse me, mate, you're under contract and you're not going anywhere next season. You're going the season after, whether it's Ange or someone else, but you're not going this season. You're clearly not going to take a contract now, and we're clearly not, no one can afford you who needs you right now. So you're with us, whether you like it or lump it. So I don't think that will add too much weight into it, even though it will be a factor that is considered when the club look at it. But the longer time goes on, the harder it is to rebuild the trust, because you can't, I'm sorry, if I finished my year at work and I said, I'm going on holiday, and my manager said, that's fine. And I'd massively, I said this before, overperformed on one KPI and underperformed on the other. And they said, look, when you get back, I need to have before you go, whatever, I need to understand how you're going to address this KPI that went terribly wrong. Just to make sure we've got a plan for next year. Otherwise, we're going to look elsewhere. And I do that, and I go off on holiday, and my boss stops responding to my texts. I get nothing back. My employees in my department can't get an answer from the company either to confirm they've got a job next season. Like, that must be quite unsettling. And then from the news outside that they're meeting with other people to take on your job. And then that goes on for weeks. And then effectively the conversation, they say to you, oh no, we weren't chatting to anyone else. You're under contract. There was no need to even speak to you. Sorry, my phone was on silent. That's not going to wash you. They've been meeting other people. You're not stupid. It just feels a bit like we couldn't find anyone else better right now. So congratulations, you can stay another year. I think a lot of people who are big supporters of Postecoglou would probably at that point be saying, go on, Ange, give Spurs the middle finger. Like, really make it horrible for them now. They've treated you like that. You could make them look really awkward now by just walking away. I don't think he would. I think people have said he's got millions of pounds to walk away from, but I don't think that's what drives Ange. I think he's one of the few people in football who wouldn't implode over this, who would say, I'm going to make you all look like such idiots by proving you're wrong. Just watch me now. I think that's how Ange would like to get his revenge, which would be a great outcome for us fans, right? If he did that and he went off and won multiple trophies and did turn it around.
Yeah.
But it does make it harder for us, I think, to rebuild that trust. Because even if Ange comes in, I don't think it's going to be a amicable relationship with those decision makers who were looking at other replacements anymore. They're almost kind of like they're almost weirdly like an enemy to you in that state, I think, where you're kind of like, I'm here just to prove you wrong, rather than I'm here to win things for you. And it's a big shame if that changes and that becomes the narrative. But I hope if he does say, and that becomes the feeling, that the fans, if he is successful and stays next year, that he says, I'm doing this for the fans, not for the people upstairs, to kind of say thank you to those who did stick with me, who did say I should have another chance and did believe I could do this. This is for you. That would be quite a nice touch.
I do agree.
I think he's gone.
Yeah,
most likely.
Jim, I have to say I agree with some of your points of Ange. I totally agree on that point. I think he's very different to a lot of maybe previous managers that we've had. Other managers that are out there that are unique. I think what does drive him and what has been the constant driver for those that have seen the documentaries, watched a lot on Ange, is that he loves proving people wrong. And I think quite perverse out of this, if he wants to stay, I think nothing would give him the greatest amount of pleasure to show. He could maybe adapt. He could maybe fight on all four fronts. And maybe there is a lot more to plan to this story than we've seen even the previous 2 seasons. I mean, Ash, where do you stand? Both the boys seem to suggest there that the longer this impasse goes on, the more unlikely it is that Ange keeps his job. Are you in the same camp as the guys on that? Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree, man. I feel like it's like a bad breakup. How do you tell like your ex like it's over? The longer you leave it, the worse it gets. And I feel like that's the situation we're in at the moment, and that's why it's taking so long. These guys already mentioned you've been talking to other managers, so imagine you're talking to other women, like, you know, before you're about to break up, and she gets wind of it. I can only imagine what Ange is going through, but he's still fighting for his life. He wants in. He doesn't want to end the relationship. He's got a special bond with the fans, and I guess he's been an underdog all his life, and I think that's what resonates to a lot of Spurs fans or fans that are new to the club as well. The kind of underdog mentality, the underdog story. He will prove them wrong. He's done it in every club, and I think that's why there's so much emotion riding on this at the moment. That's what I'm getting the feeling of. But yeah, I personally, it would have been interesting. I'm just to throw it out there. It's not what I think. I'm just going to throw it out there. But it would have been interesting if this was back in the day when, you know, I know it's a different context completely, but, you know, Harry Redknapp, he was at a certain club, Portsmouth. And I wonder if fans, if we had a YouTube back then, if fans would be like, Harry Redknapp, Portsmouth? He got relegated with them. He can't manage Tottenham Hotspurs. I'm just saying, I'm just throwing that angle out. It's like something a little bit different. Even when Newcastle, I know, you know, it's slightly different circumstance. Again, the context is completely different. But I'm just saying, you know, when Eddie Howe was announced, you know, he was relegated at Bournemouth.
Yeah,
I know he did bring them up, but he was also relegated. And I can imagine fans saying, he can't. And I know we're a bigger club, and we're in a bigger competition. So, but I just would like to be a fly on the wall and see, like, you know, in a different universe, how we would react if it was those managers and if we would still have the same type of vim. But yeah, no, I think ultimately he's a goner, mate.
Listen, we'll have to see. Look, we are going to squeeze in our first break of the show for our listeners on audio. There is over 5,000 that are watching the show live, guys. Thanks so much always for all the incredible support for Last Word on Spurs. I will just mention what I said at the top of the show. We did, as a podcast, want to leave things and not do this show until we had the decision on Ange Postecoglou. But the reality is we're just not sure where that decision is going to come. And the reality is what we're going to talk about next is something we haven't spoken about yet, which is the biggest shake-up in the ball that we've seen ever under the IMMINENT era. Before we do go to that, let's just play you out a clip that Ange did say or see in that recent documentary where he maybe gave us an insight into what would happen in season 3 if he was still going to be around.
You know, don't settle for this. We've got a taste of it now. My players have got a taste for it. The club's got a taste for it. Well, let's make sure we're back here again.
There you go. We've got a taste for it. Let's make sure we're back here again. We shall see. We're joined by the wonderful Jim from Oh So Spurs. We're joined by Dave from the Irish Hotspur. We're joined by the brilliant Ashmatic from Spurs Kings. Thank you so much for all of you wonderful listeners, viewers out there that are watching the show, that are supporting us, interacting with us. Keep interacting. You know, I think really important. We always encourage and say this. You know, get amongst our comments. We read. I can tell, read every one of those comments internally. Let us know where you are feeling with regards to Ange Postecoglou, and let us know what you're feeling ahead of the next subject, where what we understand is going to be for Tottenham their biggest shake-up of the ENIC era when it comes to the background staff. Now, we've already seen in the earlier part of the week, Daniel Levy's right-hand woman, Donna Cullen, you can tell it's late, Donna Cullen leave the football club. And also, of course, Tottenham's first team head coach, Ryan Mason, he has joined West Bromwich Albion. That is now confirmed. And that is going to be just a couple of exits, what we're led to believe a lot more could be coming in these next coming days. We understand that Scott Munn's future is in doubt as questions are arising as to what Spurs are going to be doing over the course of internally at the club. We also understand Matthew Collicott's role as Operations and Finance Director is also one that is under review. And important that we stress that at the start of the show, Vinay Venkatesham has started work as Chief Executive Officer this week and has already advertised for Business Operations Lead to work under him. Now, something we're yet to share on the show or speak about on the show, which has been rumoured, I have to say rumoured amongst the Spurs community, is that Peter Charrington has been reportedly tasked with coming into Spurs and shaking things up. And it could even mean that Daniel Levy's position as chairman may also be under significant threat. Of course, this is what's being alleged out there at the moment. None of this is confirmed, but if sources are believed to be what's true, there is said to be a massive shake-up coming in the coming days with regards to potentially fresh funds being pumped into the club by ENIC, who we understand at the moment, this will be disappointing for some out there, are keen to remain in control of Tottenham or in the form of outside investment. One thing I do want to come to Jim on first is that there's been suggestions that even with Champions League qualification and 200 million worth of profit and sustainability headroom, PSR in other words, that would put Spurs in a position of needing to sell to buy this summer without investment from ENIC or elsewhere. So I feel like there's a lot to cover there, Jim. Firstly, do you think, going back to what we discussed really at the top of the show, the reason why we've got this impasse is there, do you feel, genuine unrest in the boardroom and there really been a lack of ducks in a row at the moment, which is why we are in the situation we are in?
There's definitely changes going on at the boardroom. Whether that is, it could be as simple as Donna Cullen is at a retirement age. She got, she's part of the old ENIC crew, trophy now, mission complete, millionaire. My path is done. CEO's got their own PR team. I'm not needed anymore. Good time to shake hands, cash in the bank. I've made a fortune. I've still got some shares floating around that I can sell in the future and let someone else do the heavy lifting now. Goodbye, everyone. It could be as simple as that, but it does have the vibe of something a bit more going on. It's been no secret that we have been seeking a minority sale in the club. We know Joe Lewis's situation changed, so that adds a little bit more complexity, a slight change of hands to other family members and a few more people making decisions on that front. So that definitely changes things as well. We've definitely changed the way we structure our boardroom a lot over the last 2 or 3 years with numerous new roles, right? Even, we've had directors of football before, but we hadn't had a CEO of the football until Scott Munn came in. Vinay is a new role for us as well. Bringing in Paratici as well on top of all these people. All these new roles are popping up. So that does imply we're changing. Now, are we changing just because our chairman has decided that we need a more mature structure to complete across Europe, or are we changing because he's not going to be our chairman anymore and we're changing to something else far more extreme? Charrington, though, is a non-executive director, as I understand it. So non-executive directors don't actually have decision-making power on the board. They're there to consult, provide opinions on matters and report to higher ups. So equally, though, he could be put there by someone else with a larger stake than Daniel Levy, someone to do with the Lewis Family Trust. And be reporting back because they're wanting to make changes with their shares in the club. So there's just so much ambiguity. It's so hard to nail down. I would just touch on the talk of needing to sell before we can buy. Those headlines were a little bit misleading because they kind of insinuated in the media that it was because we had severe financial difficulties and it was one in, one out. But the reality was it's actually because in the Champions League squad limits, we currently have 18 non-homegrown players registered, and you have a limit of 18, even after the ones that have recently departed. So it's one in, one out from a squad perspective. Now, the club would definitely benefit from a cash injection because we've got £292 million worth of PSR headroom to play with, but that's not cash in the bank, right? That's just we're allowed to spend that much within a set of rules. Doesn't mean you have the money to use it. So, and when you look at our cash flow as a club, you could say, yeah, well, Spurs have got £220 million. If you look at the turnover of £630 million, and we had profits on sales of £23 million, costs of £408 million, that leaves a net reserve of £220 million for our cash flow. But we've got £188 million we owe in transfers coming up. So that takes our total down quite significantly to around 32 million pounds, right, to play with. That's not a lot. But what I would say is Spurs do have a credit facility where we can draw down on £50 million from HSBC in a form of a loan to inject cash and to go on to invest in transfers and stuff. So we certainly can buy, but I guess for Spurs, like, I think we'd all love it, including those board members, to have someone else at the table who can say, the pockets are deep, my friends. You don't need to overthink this one. If you need number 6, doesn't matter if they're £60 million or £80 million, we've got the headroom, go get them. You can amortize those obviously as well. So we could really spend an absolute lot of money if we had deep pockets from that perspective and someone was willing to swallow the losses. And to layer all on top of that, they decided not to vote in the Premier League clubs to close these loopholes around selling assets to yourself for PSR. So if we wanted to be cheeky, we could then go and start selling ourselves our own hotel or wherever it is. I would just finish off that last bit, though, to say that those rules, those loopholes don't actually function for FFP. They only function for PSR. So that the UEFA regulations, you can't use those loopholes. So the likes of Chelsea are going to get a punishment in the European side of football, but they are going to completely get off scot-free with a nice £300 million limit in the Premier League. But wouldn't we love to have that flexibility to behave like they do sometimes with a bit less craziness? Imagine if we were sensible but spent money like they did. It would be a nice position to be in, wouldn't it?
It would do. It would. Jim, thank you so much for that clarity with regards to the PSR headroom there. And again, thanks so much for those opinions on with regards to this shake-up. Ash, do you feel, again, this is the reason why we are very much kind of in limbo, because it does feel that there appears to be that feeling there's a bit of unrest at ballroom level. You know, we've seen Donna Cullen leave the club in the earlier part of the week. There's those, rumours that surround at the moment Matthew Collicott's role, as I mentioned, as operations and finance director. Vinay's just come in. We've obviously discussed the fact, Vinay coming in, does he want to oversee what is happening at the football club? He's going to want his own people potentially in and around him as well. Is this what's adding to the melting pot with regards to anything Ash at the moment, and the reason why we are, I keep using that term, in limbo at the moment?
Well, like, I look at the start of it. The start was the stadium. The stadium was going to be game changing. And then we've gone into Paratici. I remember he was the director of football. He was going to be in charge of things, and Levy was going to take a step back. So it kind of started from there. And then Scott Munn came in, a new role, and he was going to push Levy further back. So what I'm trying to say is this is nothing new to me. Vinay's come in now, and now he's going to be the CEO. So he's going to have his say, and he's going to run it how he wants to. So again, Levy's getting pushed back. But I think because what's gone on with the football club and the fact that we've always wanted to get back into the Champions League, maybe they're seeing this as an opportunity, and the board members are looking at this as a way to act now whilst investment is looking quite good, while we're looking quite attractive, because we've been at the stadium for a number of years now, and we've had a few concerts, we've had different sporting events, and we've had a few people from the Qatari group that have come in, and they've gone to boxing events. And one of the sheikhs said, "This is one of the best stadiums, or one of the best venues I've actually been to in terms of watching fights." So maybe there's some credence in that. We know that there was the consortium, the lady, I forgot her name, Sarah, forgive me, but she was at Newcastle and she came over.
Amanda Staveley.
Amanda Staveley.
Yep.
She had conversations. We've seen pictures with her. We've seen pictures of the PSG chairman inside the stadium as well. He's really linked to a lot of Qatari investment. So what I'm getting at is, I think personally, maybe people have stepped in the board and they're saying, look, we want to move forward. Maybe the whole situation with the Lewis family as well. We know there were some charges against Joe Lewis and he had to put it into a trust. And there's a lot of active members on there. I think it was the daughter of Joe Lewis I was reading.
Vivian Lewis, yeah.
Vivian Lewis really cares about the footballing side of things. So you've got a lot of people, coming in with different voices, different energies, different ideas. And maybe they're thinking now's the time where we bring this forward and we fast forward it, because lots of things happen really quick, especially in football. Things turn over really fast. So maybe now's the time where they're thinking, okay, if something's going to happen, we do it now, alongside with the Vinay appointment. So yeah, I mean, hopefully things do happen and there is a change, because we've been promised things and I've been let down. I think we are a top 6 club and we need to start behaving like a top 6 club in terms of investment, in terms of players that can compete now and help us to progress in big competitions like the Champions League. If fans want us to get to top 6, I'm all for youth investment, because you have to be different at a club like Tottenham. We're not the Chelsea, we're not Man City. Yep. We're in a different pecking order. When we try to compete against players for rival clubs, it's going to be, we're either going to have to compete on the actual transfer fee, or we're going to have to compete on wages. And we tend not to do that. And so if we're going to move in a different direction, some of the players may have to be, I know people don't want to hear it, might have to be younger players that have a higher ceiling. I know we've been linked with a Scandinavian player from FC Copenhagen called Victor Froholt. He's basically identical to Bergvall, in my opinion. He looks like a Bergvall twin, but he plays just like him from what I've seen. Profiles just like him, and he's a defensive midfielder, a 6, what lots of fans want. Is he going to be the guy to take us forward? Probably not. Will he need time to bed in? Probably. But I'm just saying, in terms of structure and the way we're moving, I think we're going to get some of those players, and some players will be ready now, and that's where we will push the boat out on. But yeah, man, that's my overall feeling, my overall arching towards the club. I don't think we're gonna all of a sudden, if we do have 200 million, we're gonna buy 2 to 3 players that are like world class. I think we'll probably buy 1 or 2, and then they'll be supplemented by younger players. Unfortunately, until like a change up the top and says, we're going to move in a completely different direction. So that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, actually, I think really important points that you make. And I mean, coming around to you, Dave, I think one of the frustrations that I'm seeing a lot with regards to, of course, social media is the fact that obviously at the moment the transfer window is open, and there's an opportunity really early on to make some moves, and I think with Tottenham, they have the opportunity really to try and capitalise on some other clubs. They've had obviously the fact they've won the Champions League. There's that big law to try and bring players to the club. I think you already are seeing in regards to Liverpool, they had the likes of Frimpong, there's Wirtz, there's Kirkes that they're moving for. You've seen Arsenal, I think Zubamendi, one that's very close to being over the line. Sesko being linked. You look at City, Aït-Nouri, Rendes, Cherki, Chelsea, Delap, Mainland, the goalkeeper, United, Cunha, and Buemo, maybe close to being done. Fans, are they right, Dave, to be having some concerns right now? Because transfer windows move fast. Clubs are always looking to improve. And I did say this actually recently. This is no disrespect to Ange, whoever is going to come into Tottenham, if there is going to be a change of manager. I'm not being negative when I say this. I think it's going to be very, very hard for Tottenham to go from 17th in the Premier League to just jump straight back into the top 4. I just don't see football being like that. I think, yes, we will improve. I don't think we'll be 17th again, But my point is, I think you have to also be real and acknowledge the fact that there's going to be a lot of rebuilding that needs to be done in terms of the side to get it up to a level where it is going to be able to compete once again, dare I say, even in the top 6. I think people actually underestimate how much of those middle of the table sides have really improved in the Premier League over the course of the last 18 months. I don't think it's as easy as coming into the football club or even sticking with Ange that we're going to go straight from being 17th back into the top 4. I think there will be a case that if Tottenham finish in the top 6, maybe people might think I'm being crazy. I think top 6 next season wouldn't be a terrible season for Tottenham. We can maybe again grab a cup next season. I think we have to be real that this is not going to be done overnight. And it's whether, again, people want to rip it up, start over again, or stick with something where we have seen a trophy. And I've been highly critical, as many know, around Ange Postecoglou. I've still got my doubts internally with regards to if he can make it sustainable over a 38-game season. I think when you look at the stats, when you've got the likes of Vicario, Porro, Adoggi, Van der Ven, Romero fit, we've seen how much that helps the team. But I think it's also the drop-off that we've seen, that when you don't have those players available and the alternatives that are coming in, that's where Tottenham got massive, massive problems. And again, a lot of this right now does come down to the ownership to try and resolve and to fix going into season 3 or going into a different direction. And right now, there does appear to be, Dave, a lot of boardroom unrest, fair to say.
Yeah, look, it's very frustrating for Tottenham fans. As you can see, the tensions are building. What you're seeing right now is a lot of clubs picking up, players that are going to make a massive influence on their team next season, have a massive impact, and they're picking up the best that they can in them positions. And, it almost feels like when this mini market's closed, we're going to be scrounging around, trying to get the best of the rest. And I mean, I think the club have missed a massive opportunity off the back of winning that Europa League. They could have used this window to deliver a signing of gravitas and say, wet your lips, for next season, and then when the next window comes around, bring in a couple more players. And I think that would have also helped them in terms of generate, season ticket sales, get them sold a lot quicker, jersey sales, etc., etc. And I feel like they've missed a massive opportunity yet again. It's ironic, actually. Donna Cullen had a massive oversight over Tottenham's relations with the media and the fans, but she failed spectacularly. This new guy coming in, you would presume, would have the same remit. And again, we're sitting here failing absolutely spectacularly. You cannot write it. Our public relations is absolutely shocking at this football club. But look, when it comes to signings, I'm of the opinion, Ricky, I think no matter what manager we bring in, this squad needs to be elevated. This squad needs massive improvement, because if you bring in another manager with the squad as is, he'll suffer the same fortunes as Ange Postecoglou to a large degree, where when your best players go out injured, it's going to have a massive, massive impact. When I actually look across the back line and that, I think we only really need a fullback, and that'll give, manager a full, complete set of decent enough options to work with. I think where our problems comes in is that midfield and that forward line. That midfield, it's a lot of our games tend to be end to end because that midfield is not competitive enough, combative enough to be able to turn the ball over. Also, technically enough, I would argue, they're not good enough to keep possession for a sustained period of time. But also that forward line, we go on the press, we force teams into mistakes, but we never, ever punish them for them mistakes. We don't take there was a large part there where we weren't taking a lot of the chances we were creating, and then all of a sudden a lot of the chances started drying up towards the end of this season. It's a huge problem. I think there are two massive areas that really need to be overhauled this summer, and I think if we do it and we sign the right players, there's no reason why we can't jump back up into that top half of the table. Look, we can sit here and say where we finished this season is 17th, but the reality is if Ange Postecoglou slapped off the Europa League and concentrated on the league, we would have finished higher up this league. We would be nowhere near 17th, and then all of a sudden that gap isn't as big to make. And if we can go from 5th down to 17th for a lot of the business that we should have done and we didn't do last summer, if we do the right business, I'm sure we can make a similar league. But to your point, it's why it's imperative, and this is why I keep coming on here, battering the narrative about quality matters. We can't keep going down this route of just signing young players and hoping that they're all going to come together, form a great squad, and we can push on and forward and compete, because football isn't waiting for us to develop these guys. What you're seeing now is you're actually seeing the top 8, the top 10 now, all competing for Champions League places. And you're like, I've done it last season and maybe in seasons gone by. I'm sitting there looking at some of these other clubs, some of the players they're signing. I'm like, how's he gone there? How are we not in for him? We could do with a player like that. And I would also say to people, it's now post-Kane and post-Son era. So, we that's going to take a massive impact on this football club. Going into next season, I do think you could potentially see going into a season without Son, and even if we keep him, he's no longer going to have the impact across the season that we need. So that urges even more importance for the club to buy some quality on this football pitch. No matter what manager we have in, this lacks experience, it lacks quality on the football pitch, and we need both. So if they don't go and do that this summer, it's going to be another long, hard season, regardless of the manager next season.
Yeah.
And when it comes to board level, look, I think it's a good thing that's being freshened up. I think that a lot of that board was together for such a long time, stability in the board level and stuff like that. But realistically, when you look back on it, they've been operating the club post-stadium build the same way they were operating it pre-stadium build, and that's not what we were told the stadium with the effect it would have on the football club. We were told it would be used to keep our best players here, match the top wages, match the ambition of our top players, bring in a better level of players. I'd argue our recruitment's actually got worse in the new stadium than what it was before we went into the stadium, and it hasn't exactly been that game changer. And I think what you're seeing now at Tottenham Hotspur is maybe a lot of that board getting on in age and maybe looking towards their pensions and shelving a lot of money outside this football club, the highest bonuses and stuff like that, while we're paying some of the lowest wages in the league. And, that's telling on the football pitch. So they're all getting paid, top wages for doing a top job. What we're lacking in terms of on the football pitch massively, and it's getting worse and worse. So I think it's good to have that shake up, fresh ideas. Hopefully whoever comes in will sanction, saying instead of making your budget, let's spread over 6-7 players, let's actually go and bring 2-3 quality players in, because they'll have more of an impact on your team than spreading it over 7-8 average players that realistically you're always looking to develop. We need to start bringing in a finished article, and hopefully a new shake up in the board will bring fresh ideas to start doing that. But not only that, also come out and start protecting Tottenham in the media, protecting Tottenham when it comes to refereeing decisions and stuff like that. A lot of other clubs do it. They protect themselves to come out against narratives, put pressure on the referees. We don't. We sit back and just say, have a field day with our football club, rip us apart, and it's nowhere near good enough. Also, relations with fans going forward needs to change as well. We need to feel like we're a part of this club. We're a part of the decisions that they make, and that we're all moving forward. There's a massive opportunity now with a reset at board level for them to do this going forward. And hopefully they realize that and take this opportunity, because when you look at that parade, over 200,000 Spurs fans, some people say over 250,000 Spurs fans, it's clear and evident that we are a sleeping giant. Now, the thing that's being portrayed to us is that we need to get to that level. No, we are a sleeping giant when you see the amount of fans we have and the history that we've had. And I just hope that it's actually woken and shaking people up and go, well, hang on, we can actually be competitive on the field and actually enjoy a little bit of success, so we're not constantly being ridiculed in the media, while actually making a lot of money from this football club. Because if they can engage that 250,000 fans, and we're doing well, they'll sell more merch, they'll sell tickets a lot quicker, etc. Sponsorships will become bigger and better because they want to be a part of something like that, and everything else. It all has a knock-on effect. So hopefully it will be for the greater good of this football club moving forward, because I feel like it almost became stale and a bit of an old gentleman's club where people were just shelling, future-proofing their own finances rather than actually looking out and caring about Tottenham Hotspur and pushing us forward.
Absolutely, Armin. I have to agree. Dave, to all the points you said there. I think it's going to be absolutely fascinating how this does pan out. And look, as we look for a close, Postecoglou's departure would mean, for Tottenham, it would mean a 14th manager in 24 years. And Ange was the first head coach to last one full season in half a decade, let alone 2. So it feels like there's some big decisions that are going to be coming Tottenham's way. And I think really difficult to judge what Tottenham will do. But it does feel like if it's collectively, if it's solely, it's probably, do you know if you agree as we look for a close here, do you think in Daniel Levy's tenure at Tottenham, going back, 20 years plus now, is this Daniel Levy's biggest ever decision in charge at Tottenham? And is it also, alongside that, the biggest gamble to take who comes in next if he does decide to make that call?
He's had some big decisions to make, hasn't he?
He's
had some big ones. And I'm trying to think back to the major ones. So you'd probably say
Pochettino, probably the main one.
Yeah, but sacking Martin Jol was quite a big one.
At half time.
Because I think we'd been new to European football then. I mean, I think anyone would tell you that the half-time part of it is something that took a lot of forgiveness from a large part of our fan base to get over, because we had a affiliation with Man. But there's been big decisions. Even building the stadium at the time we did, moving to Wembley and all that disruption for the long-term benefit at a time where typical Spurs, the squad is peaking at an opportunity where you need stability to just get that last little few percent out and get things over. He's a lot of big decisions to make, and he's got a lot of them right. He's got a lot of them wrong as well. And this one again. I think it is up there with. I would say is because of the decisions he's made, we are on to kind of stable footing as a club now, where even if he gets this wrong, but I think it will be the CEO gets decision. Look, we didn't even know, by the way, keeping Ange could result in failure or success, and changing manager could result in failure or success. Yeah. But it could be that you keep Ange, you don't have Ange, and you keep Ange, it doesn't work out, but equally if you change manager, it doesn't work out. So we won't know, Captain Hindsight, that kind of thing. But the one thing that is different now to Spurs than Spurs of old is I don't think we need to panic as much, which is why I wish we'd be a little bit less panicky in this whole situation. We have built a foundation as a club where we can finish 17th and still not have massive financial issues and implications to that, like other clubs would have seen. Not being in Europe for 2 or 3 seasons is a blow to us, but it's not detrimental to us like it would be to an Aston Villa. So we have that stability as a club because of some of those big decisions we've made and sacrifices we've made in the past, which, by the way, makes me a bit defensive when other fans of, Villas and that, they start saying, come on, this is so unfair. Spurs can do this. Well, we did go through a lot of pain and sacrifice a lot to now have this stable financial footing and miss out arguably on trophies to have this opportunity. Now, we're getting, that's our kind of minor, it's a reward for that. But yeah, I'd say it's probably I don't think it's one of the biggest two or three decisions he's had to make actually over his whole tenure. I think he's had to make some bigger ones, but it's definitely the biggest in the last 5 years. I think it's the biggest in the last 5 years. Yeah.
Jim, we can't thank you enough. What's coming up on Oh So Spurs? I know you've got some interesting stuff come up over there. What can people find over So Spurs?
Tomorrow, if it's your kind of thing, understanding the finances, I'm on with someone from two people from corporate who work in corporate finance, and we will be going over the figures of using UEFA's new financial rules that are coming in next year. How do we marry up against the other, the big 6 sides? So how much can we leverage our position versus theirs, factoring cash in the bank and liquidity and everything else? So basically, what's our position and strength in the transfer market? How much can we spend versus our rivals in Europe moving forward?
Jim, you've been a star. We look forward to the next time already. Thank you so much. Ash, thank you. I have to say again, for balance, for context, we were trying to wait to come back until we had the decision, but we know when it's going to be in Tottenham World. So by the time this goes out for listeners and audio, we may have that decision. Who knows? Ash, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to have you on, obviously, over at the Spurs Kings TV. They're always busy over there. Ash, anything you want to give a shout out to? What's coming up over there with you and Miles and the crew?
Yeah, no, nothing, man. Just, guys, if you like what we're saying, if you enjoy some of our content, just please subscribe and just keep doing the wonderful work you're doing, Ricky and Jim and Irish, of course, Hotspur. Just make sure you give us a like and you just, you share and subscribe to these wonderful people, man. That's really much it. That's pretty much it.
Ash, thank you. The next time we see you, we'll hopefully have a decision. But can't promise it's Tottenham. Dave, thank you. I know we had to really rush to get this one set up and arranged, so we can't thank you enough. Dave, what's coming over at the Irish Hotspur? Like all of us, I think we're all probably waiting on what comes next with Tottenham Hotspur, right? We're waiting on you, Tottenham. We're waiting on you to tell us what comes next, and we can then know what comes next.
Well, that's exactly it. I put my life on hold mostly today, expecting a decision to be made, and I've got the same done tomorrow, mostly on hold, expecting the decision tomorrow. You're hoping that they've read the room and they're not going to leave this go over the weekend. Just give us the answer. At the end of the day, all the fans want is some clarity. And to be honest with you, whether it's a decision I like or not, and I think it's the same with most people, they're going to look to back it. So just make the bloody decision. But apart from that, not a lot going on over there. Just waiting for a decision to be made. And when they do, I will be live at some point to share my thoughts on it. But look, run the likes up here. Show the love to everybody on the panel and enjoy your weekend.
Dave, thank you so much. And for once, Tottenham Hotspur, as you can see across social media, the eyes are all on you. Do something, Tottenham. Do something. from the wonderful Jim from Oh So Spurs, to the brilliant Ashmatic, from the always brilliant Dave at the Irish Hotspur. We have been the last word on Spurs. We promise you the next time we're back, something has to have happened from us all. Please keep safe. Please keep well. Please keep liking. Please keep subscribing. And as always, come on, you Spurs.